Time to make some bread. Hello and thanks for watching. This is not what I would call a tutorial. This is more of I made some bread and here's the results. The recipe I'm following actually came from Sailing Magic Carpet. They're a channel here on YouTube that they do sailing videos. They actually refurbished a boat. It's a really interesting channel overall. But they had a video on baking some bread, and it looked so good in their video that I just had to try it and see what the results were, or what my results would be. So again, this isn't a tutorial really, but as far as the recipe, it's essentially a tablespoonful of active dry yeast, a tablespoon of salt, and 900 grams of flour. And for theirs, they split that between white flour and I think rye flour. I didn't have any rye flour, so instead what I used was wheat flour and a little bit of oats. The oats I would use again, but you really only notice them when the oats were on the crust, so that's probably how I'd use it in the future, is just as a kind of a garnish on the top. Here I am adding water to the yeast, and I'm shooting for 110 degrees Fahrenheit so that the yeast can activate. If the yeast isn't properly activated, the bread won't rise, so this step is pretty important. After mixing that together, I go ahead and set the timer for about 10 minutes. Didn't show adding all of the dry ingredients to the bowl, but I think you get the point. What they recommend was majority, I think like 500 or 600 grams of the flour to be white, and the rest of the flour to be the rye, or in my case, wheat. I think I did 600, 390, and then 10 grams of oats. I just mixed it together on low using the dough hook on the stand mixer, and kind of slowly added the water along the edges here to help make sure that all of the flour gets incorporated. Actually ended up taking the dough hook off and scraping the sides. I tried this recipe again with a bit less flour on it, and I didn't find I needed to do that as far as scraping the sides. So I think the reason why it was necessary here was just because it's so much material in the bowl in general. After mixing, I set a timer for 1 hour and let it rise. I picked up a cast iron pot. I believe it's the same thing as a Dutch oven, and I use this for this loaf. I actually made a loaf before this one where I used a standard stainless steel pot, which came out okay, but they had rubber grips on the lid, which burnt a little bit, left a little bit of charred residue on there. But the cast iron is supposed to help make the heat a bit more even, and I feel like the cast iron did do its job, so I do recommend that. One of the tricks when it comes to kneading the dough is to make your hands wet, and essentially when your hands are wet, the dough doesn't stick to it. And after you've gotten the dough mostly separated from the sides, then it pretty much stops sticking to your hands, so you don't have to keep rinsing your hands every single time. And the more times you do it, the less it becomes a problem. After each fold of the dough, I turned the bowl about a quarter turn and continued on until the dough lost its stretchiness. I don't know exactly how many times I folded the dough before letting it rest again. And I don't think I even included every single fold in the video here, but it's probably about 10-ish times per session. And then I let it rest 30 minutes in the middle there. So you can see I did that several times. Now I'm testing there to see if the dough is springing back or not. If the dough springs back too quickly, it's not finished. But if it takes a moment to reform, then that's an indication that it's approximately done proofing. You're supposed to use a proofing basket, or I forget exactly what it's called. Didn't have one, so I just used this bowl that I lined with a little bit of flour. And then I pulled the edges of the dough up towards the center in order to form a bit of a ball. Next, I preheated the oven to 450 with the pot in there. That's of course very important that the pot itself is also preheated. I was considering just grabbing the dough and setting it in, but I realized that all of the edges would have been on the top instead of the bottom. So that's why I plopped it in like that. And then I took a knife and scored the top. I like the cross. The cross seems traditional, so that's what I went with. And I let that bake for 45 minutes. At that point, I went ahead and pulled the lid off. Let it bake for an additional 10 minutes just to get the top crispy.
Much better than the last time. It's much taller. This is hot. Set that down.
What I'm showing here is the crackling sound. So listen. So anyways, I don't know how well that showed up on the video, but the bread itself is crackling, and apparently that's the steam inside the bread forming little bubbles inside and kind of forming the final texture of the crumb. So it's important not to cut into it right away. And I'll be honest, I never imagined I could make a loaf that looked that good. Surprised myself with it. You can see how the bread is soft. Didn't last a full week before it went hard, but I think with more practice and keeping the bread covered, it should last a little bit longer. But yeah, overall, very happy with it. Turned out great. The taste was there. Texture was there. Yeah, thanks for watching.